This is a Fox San Antonio special.
"13 hours, we took a beating. And we're kind of like Timex. We kept on ticking. 911 center collapsed. A lot of people thought we were dead. We don't know what our norm's going to be. We don't have a single clue what normalcy means to anybody anymore.
Carla was probably one of the most severe storms that has ever hit the Texas coast. The strength of the wind was just impossible to describe.
Pretty much everybody in town left. There were very few people left in town.
So when Carla actually hit, only those people who determined to stay were here.
The age of weather satellites had just begun with the launch of TIROS-1, April 1st, 1960. The satellite carried two tiny television cameras, each weighing about 2 pounds. One camera captured a wide view of the Earth, about 450 miles below, while the other recorded a narrower, more detailed view. It flew in a polar orbit, snapping photos every 30 seconds, and could only operate in the daylight. It was our first weather satellite. Every year, about 100 tropical disturbances roam the open Atlantic Ocean, the Caribbean Sea, and the Gulf of Mexico, some becoming hurricanes. Texas has seen its share of those storms dating back to the time of the Spanish explorers. Over the years, many settlements were founded along the Texas coast, like Indianola, Texas. There's not much left of this once thriving port city of 5,000. 3 hurricanes, one in 1874, another in 1875, and the last one in 1886, left the city in pieces, unable to recover, its residents leaving and moving inland to Victoria and New Braunfels. Flash forward to 1961 and a satellite image of Hurricane Carla in the Gulf of Mexico. Carla began as a tropical depression in the southwest Caribbean Sea on September 3, 1961, and strengthened to a large major hurricane over the Gulf of Mexico on the evening of September 7th. The winds increased to around 175 miles an hour early on the morning of September the 11th, making Carla a Category 5 hurricane. This blurry black and white image started one of the largest mass evacuations in Texas history.
It hadn't been that many years since we had a storm. I think it was a big storm back in '45, and a lot of the people there still remembered it, and they got out of town.
I was with a radio station, and we scattered out about 8 different people to various locations. The strength of the wind was just impossible to describe.
When the wind becomes over 100 miles an hour, that wind hits the side of the building as a solid force. It's the sound of the wind that is probably the most terrifying. And the fact that it goes on for hours, maybe 6 or 8 hours, it seems at times that there's no end to it.
The highest peak wind gusts were estimated to be near 170 miles an hour at Port Lavaca, blowing away the anemometer after reading a 153-mile-an-hour wind gust. The wind gusts were estimated to be about 150 miles an hour at Victoria, Port Aransas, and Edna. The hurricane pushed a storm surge of 22 feet above mean sea level at the head of Lavaca Bay in Port Lavaca. This is the highest storm surge in Texas hurricane history, with the storm surge reaching 10 miles inland in places.
There was major damage throughout the area, so it was widespread, and it was very much of a total disaster as far as the community was concerned.
This was 1961, if you remember, and there weren't too many people who had 35-millimeter cameras at that time, and I had one. I went to Port Lavaca and took some pictures of the destruction there. There was a lot of it.
It was a magnificent thing to see. That's hard to say, but that was the truth. There was great excitement in seeing something as vicious as that and the tremendous power that it had.
The coastal city of Port O'Connor was virtually destroyed by Hurricane Carla. Further inland at Victoria, 500 homes were destroyed, another 4,200 damaged by 150-mile-an-hour gusts. No other hurricane has made landfall on the Texas coast with the intensity of Hurricane Carla, and is rivaled only by the Indianola storm of 1886.
I've never seen anything like it. Harvey was something, but it was like a spit in the bucket compared to that thing.
When we come back, the storm that hit Texas 3 times in 6 days. Hurricane Carla was the most intense hurricane to make landfall on the Texas coast in the 20th century, and the second in recorded history only to the Indianola hurricane of 1886. Carla was the last of 6 hurricanes to make landfall on the Texas coast as a Category 4 hurricane. Hurricane-force gust winds were felt all along the Texas coast, from Port Mansfield all the way to Galveston. Extreme peak wind gusts were estimated to be near 170 miles an hour at Port Lavaca, blowing away the anemometer after it recorded a 153-mile-an-hour gust. Carla began as a tropical depression on September the 3rd, 1961, skirting the Yucatan Peninsula and entering the Gulf of Mexico 4 days later as a major hurricane.
We broadcast a lot of information that was of real use to the people because they knew the storm was approaching and they knew the size of that storm. They knew that it was not a typical hurricane.
Forecasters knew this storm was different. Its rapid intensification signaled an overwhelming power that had not been seen in 75 years. They knew it was going to be bad. That bad feeling was back in 2017 as forecasters, this time with high-tech tools, watched a storm develop in the Caribbean. Harvey started as a typical weak August tropical storm that later fell apart over the central Caribbean Sea. Days later, the storm reformed over the Bay of Campeche. Forecasters at the National Hurricane Center were not the only ones tracking the storm. Forecasters here were keeping a close eye on the system.
And we were seeing things in the models that concerned us as Harvey was forecasted to come over the Yucatan and back out into the Gulf.
The Air Force Reserve hurricane hunters were flying missions into the Gulf of Mexico to gather information close up, looking for signs of intensification.
For hurricanes to intensify and rapidly intensify, they need very warm water. Warm water acts as fuel for the hurricane.
Hurricanes also need calm winds high in the atmosphere.
Harvey encountered those perfect conditions for rapid intensification in the western Gulf of Mexico. Light wind shear and very warm water temperatures.
The perfect conditions allowed Harvey to build quickly with an eye forming and the winds reaching hurricane force on August the 24th. The last time a hurricane had threatened the Texas coast was Hurricane Ike in 2008. A hurricane warning was issued along the Texas coast from Port Mansfield to Matagorda.
We started to see some things in the computer models that we look at that sometimes we only see a few times in our career. We were seeing forecasted rainfall from our computer models of 30 to 40 inches over the hill country.
The storm continued its rapid intensification, reaching Category 3 strength before noon on August the 25th. Evacuation of the mid-Texas coast began, much in the same way it had been done ahead of Carla in 1961. Conditions were perfect for Harvey to grow stronger, and Weather Service offices all along the coast and inland were keeping a close eye on the storm.
It becomes a much bigger operation when you've got a big storm like Harvey approaching the Texas coast. Everything changes, what we do on a day-to-day basis changes.
Conference calls with the National Hurricane Center were ongoing. One topic of discussion, how to warn the public.
And we talk about the forecast that's about to be released and the messaging. What are we going to message? What words are we going to use? For Harvey, it was like, we're going to settle on the word catastrophic flooding.
Tropical storm force winds reached the mid-Texas coast by noon. 6 hours later, Hurricane Hunter aircraft confirmed Harvey had intensified into a Category 4 hurricane with 130-mile-an-hour winds. The word catastrophic was being used to describe Harvey's rainfall and storm surge.
I think it is about the multi-hazards that we're dealing with these hurricanes. 50% of the fatalities in a tropical system is storm surge. And you're looking at the next 25% or greater being the inland rain. Everybody has to always remember that it's a multi-hazard approach to these hurricanes. I mean, literally it could be hundreds and hundreds of miles away and getting feet of rain from a system. So it's you concentrate away from the track. You also look outside the cone because you need to really understand those dangers and if you're vulnerable.
Harvey came along, people who were there during Carla understood what those hurricanes can do, and they were aware of that, cognizant of it, and so they took precautions probably at a better rate than they did when they were present during Carla.
Harvey's eye wall began to move onshore by 8 p.m. and made landfall by 9:45 between Port Aransas and Port O'Connor, less than 50 miles from where Hurricane Carla came ashore in 1961. It was the first time a Category 4 hurricane had made landfall on the Texas coast in 56 years. It was the beginning of a catastrophic event for Texas.
Hours, we took a beating. And we're kind of like Timex. We kept on ticking. 911 center collapsed. A lot of people thought we were dead. We don't know what our norm's going to be. We don't have a single clue what normalcy means to anybody anymore.
Life changed for Jimmy Kendrick and the residents of Aransas County on a hot August night in 2017 when Hurricane Harvey came ashore.
We've lost a lot of restaurants, a lot of bars. We've lost our convention center. We lost our pier. We lost our playground. Those things are all gone. We lost our whole total workforce, and we have no housing for it. And that's going to be our hardest thing, is bringing people back here to work because there's no place to live.
11 months later, the town is still rebuilding, with many businesses still closed.
Right now, we're in pretty good shape, but we're losing money every day that we can't replace because of what it's done to us.
One of the first businesses to open in Fulton was a local restaurant.
Houdat is a landmark here in Rockport, Fulton, so everybody knows the name Houdat. It was pretty upsetting to a lot of people. They thought that we were never going to open again. It just looked unreal. Like, this really wasn't your town. We had to get all the electrical fixed, get inside, clean up everything.
Getting businesses to rebuild and people back to work is a priority with Mayor Kendrick.
There ain't nothing here to live, nothing to rent. If you don't have it, if you don't have people to work, you don't have a town. 5 years from now, we should be back as a town, we should be done. But as a community, we'll still be hurting.
Dealing with day-to-day operations and the rebuilding process has not been easy.
We had one of the greatest piers in the country, the 1,250-foot pier, 300-foot T on it, lighted green. It was in the Texas highway magazines and magazines all over the country. We're trying to raise money to build it back because it wasn't insured, because it was over the water. There's no money coming in and only money going out, and you expect that to be there over 3 years. You don't expect to have to pay back the 3 years, and we're paying a year at a time.
Harvey was the most significant tropical cyclone rainfall event in United States history since reliable rainfall records began around the 1800s. The highest storm total rainfall report from Harvey was 60.58 inches near Nederland, Texas, with another report of 60.54 inches from near Groves, Texas. The San Antonio area was spared from the heaviest rains.
So in the western Gulf of Mexico, the western sides of tropical systems, you'll see what we call sharp gradients in the rainfall. You don't have to go too far distance-wise to go from very little rainfall to a lot of rainfall. It's all about the location of the actual track of the center of the storm. Harvey ended up turning east of us, installing east of us, which spared us the stronger winds and the heavy rainfall. So you just got to go down the road to Seguin, and they had about 15 to 20 inches of rainfall just in Seguin, 20 miles away. Just a track error of about 30 to 90 miles spared San Antonio from about 20 to 30 inches of rainfall.
Had the track of Harvey been just 90 miles to the west, a lot more of that heavy rainfall would have been right over San Antonio, including lower hurricane force winds. Hurricane Carla and Harvey were both Category 4 storms when they came ashore. However, they couldn't have been more different. Harvey was a slow, wandering storm that maintained a connection to the Gulf of Mexico and produced extraordinary rainfall. Carla was a fast-moving storm that produced moderate rainfall, a 22-foot storm surge, and estimated wind speeds of greater than 170 miles an hour. Both storms devastated the Texas coast.
I think it is about the multi-hazards that we're dealing with these hurricanes. 50% of the fatalities in a tropical system is storm surge. And you're looking at the next 25% or greater being the inland rain.
We were just beginning to use satellites when Hurricane Carla came ashore in 1961. 57 years later, our technology and knowledge has vastly improved.
I think we're just starting to get used to all this new satellite data. The new satellite went up. NOAA put that up, this past year, and all the data that we're seeing. We're seeing eye wall replacements. We're seeing early development. We're seeing steering currents that may be in the northwest United States that will be making its way and could alter the course of a hurricane later. You dive into the details. We have tons of products for the Hurricane Center and the local weather forecast offices that really dive into those impacts. Start looking at the rainfall, peeling away the layers of that hurricane, rainfall, tornadoes, looking at all the different parameters, and I think that's where it is. I think it's actually, let's talk impacts when we talk about the next hurricane.
The world has changed a good deal since 1961. Coastal populations have increased, with many new residents that have never experienced a hurricane, and climate patterns that have changed, adding to the impacts. The peak of the hurricane season is still ahead. Seasonal forecasters are keeping a close eye on all the indicators. Researchers are studying new ways to predict rainfall. Insurers are helping people understand flood risk. And we have a new set of satellites to keep a high-res eye on the tropical waters. When we come back, a current season update, a look at what we've learned, and new information that will help us deal with Mother Nature's greatest storm.
We don't have a single clue what normalcy means to anybody anymore.
Hurricane Harvey came ashore on August the 25th near Fulton, Texas, and 3 hours later hit the Texas coast with 132-mile-an-hour winds. The storm didn't get far. It slowed after steering currents became weak, no longer pushing the storm along.
So storms need currents to kind of help them move them along, currents in the atmosphere that kind of push them along. If those currents are strong, they keep moving and turn and keep going. If they become weak, very weak currents, they'll stall. They won't move anywhere until something pushes it along.
Harvey stalled for 3 days, made a slow loop, and drifted back to the coast. The storm never lost its connection with the warm waters of the Gulf. The result produced torrential rainfall east of the storm center.
So it's all about the location of the actual track of the center of the storm. Harvey ended up turning east of us, installing east of us, which spared us the stronger winds and the heavy rainfall.
Dr. Firat Tesik at the University of Texas, San Antonio is studying raindrops to get a better idea of how to forecast rain. The accuracy of radar rainfall estimations depends on the ability of the radar to recognize the differences in raindrops. Dr. Tessick has found that under certain conditions, the radar just may not be able to do that.
During hurricanes, there is a very large volumes of water is transferred from the atmosphere to the Earth's surface. Wind and turbulence in the atmosphere may cause deviations of the raindrop characteristics from these predicted values.
Radar systems are programmed to recognize the shape of a raindrop. When it can't do that, it can't accurately estimate rainfall. A National Science Foundation grant has allowed Dr. Tessick to develop a new instrument, the High-Speed Optical Distrometer. This new instrument can track single raindrops no matter the shape.
These improvements in the estimations may help us make better decisions for flood-prone areas and will help us to improve numerical weather and climate models for predicting future events.
Predicting changes in climate conditions in the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico is important.
A warmer ocean is going to evaporate more into the storm. In addition to that, there is some evidence in a warming climate, the forward speed of hurricanes is going to slow down. So those two things working together contributed to the very intense rainfall from Harvey.
Conditions in the Atlantic this year are dramatically different than in 2017. The Atlantic has been much colder, and Saharan dust has been flowing off the coast of Africa. It has all but shut down the Atlantic hurricane season so far. Add the trend toward a hybrid El Nino in the Pacific, and we see the focus moving to the Gulf of Mexico.
In this special case of an El Nino, we do see the tendency for a few more storms to form in the Gulf of Mexico.
The current hurricane seasonal forecast is trending toward a less active season than last year. However, it only takes one storm to make it an active season for someone. Preparation is key.
We can't be resilient without building codes. It's a non-starter. If your buildings fail with people inside, whether they're at home or at work or at school, there's no resilience. Really important for people to stop and think, where it rains, it can flood. 20% of the 136,000 homes flooded in Houston are the ones that are insured. 80% are without flood insurance.
It's important to be prepared ahead of time and to make sure that you have proper insurance coverage before the storm hits. And the time to buy insurance is not when the tropical storm force or hurricane force winds are battering against you.
There is a 30-day waiting period to purchase flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program. Hurricanes are multi-hazard storms that many times require leaving your home.
One of the barriers to that is people don't always know where to go. What we've done is we've created a mobile application using a mobile application platform to match the requirements of an evacuee with the offering of a host. So that the mobile app uses the technology to match them together. Here's what I need, here's what you have, let's match those together, and for a couple of days, we'll live this and help you get back on your feet.
The app is called Harmony and can be found in the Apple App Store or on Google Play. August and September are active times for hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico. Changes in our climate patterns are setting the stage for storms that could be more intense and bring exceptional rainfall.
This has been a Fox San Antonio special.